What's the deal, bro? Big Said from Said Talks TV, and we back again, bro, with another video, man. A lot of stuff going on right now. Currently, it is February of 2026, early February. Y'all might be getting this at a different date, so there's really no point in putting that out there. I just want everybody to be very cognizant, very aware of the sides in everything that's going on right now. We are very, very divided right now as a country. Extremely divided. Very far left, very far right. Both sides are, extremely divided right now as a whole. And then amidst all of this, we have some documents coming out kind of proving that there really is no difference from the top to the bottom. The bottom is the real difference. The people, not at the top, the people that are not in the political structure are the ones who actually have these ideologies that are different. And then in reality, the ones at the top really share the same ideals, are really in the same kind of club together. And so, some would beg to say, well, what's really the difference here if everyone at the top is just going to get along and they're just all in one big club, right? So be very careful what type of information you're taking in. Be very careful, and also pay attention to, who you're around. Pay attention to, the little things that people do say as far as what side they're going to be a part of and things like that. Because what's going to be very interesting is years from now, people are going to say that they, never supported a certain political party or whatnot. But you have to pay attention today because the type of people that you have around you is very important, right? Their ideals, their ideologies, the people that they listen to, what they truly believe. In times like this, it is very revealing of character. And character is extremely important, especially going forward, because when things get all, soft and mushy and peachy and creamy again, you really won't know who's around you or who's really for you or who really cares about your best interests. These are the times where you find that kind of stuff out. Times where things are difficult, times where people do have to pick a side, and times where, people are a lot more outspoken than they usually would be. Once you find out where a person stands on something, it could be contrary to what you believe, and it could be contrary to your entire reality. The way that you see yourself as a person, what you believe in, it could be polar opposite, and it could be anti-you. And so you don't have to have debates. You don't have to have arguments. You don't have to have confrontations with people who are, contrary of your own reality and what you believe in. You don't have to associate with these people whatsoever. And so for the intelligent ones that are listening now, don't feel like you have to win every battle or win every argument with a person who's on the opposite end of the spectrum. Just use the time to listen for understanding, to see where a person is at, and then move accordingly, move a little bit different from there. Because once things all roll back around and are a lot more chummy, right, you'll still know where this person stands, you'll still know what this person believes, you'll still know how this person feels, right? Because it's bound to happen, Man, just woke up, getting ready for work, so, But, yeah, take note of those things. It's very, very important. And continue to read. Continue to educate yourself. Continue to work hard. Continue to go to work. Don't lose sleep. Don't lose work. And don't lose a bag behind this foolishness that they are propagating in front of our eyes. Because ultimately, it's all about division. Because at the end of the day, we're going to be the ones who are sitting there rioting, protesting, arguing with each other. People at the bottom who don't really have much, say so anyway. It's not going to be a whole, thing where it's people at the top fighting. And unfortunately, it usually never is. So that's something that you definitely have to be cognizant of, man, because at some point you're going to realize what is the point, right? So, and it's all usually a distraction. If you ever notice at the beginning of the year, it's always a lot going on that distracts people. At the end of the year, everyone's making their New Year's resolutions. Everyone's setting goals. Everyone's focused on what 2026 is going to have for them, regardless of the year. This has been going on for a long time. It could have been 2010 to 2011. Point is, you're focused on your goals, what you want to accomplish, what you're moving towards, what you're trying to achieve, and here comes a bunch of stuff on the news to distract you. Things that you may be passionate about, may feel are important, but ultimately it's to distract you from what you've been focused on, what you're trying to accomplish, and what you think is important. And so you have to be aware that if you notice, it's always a pattern. You have to start using your pattern recognition skills to see that, okay, every year around the same time is something that comes out on the news that's real big, real controversial, that divides people and that distracts you from what you're trying to accomplish this year. Coincidence? Probably not, right? So that means that you have to stay focused. You have to stay focused, because when it comes to the workplace, you're going to start to see people missing work. You're going to start to see people, focused on other things. You're going to start to see people bucking against the system, and the thing is, unless you plan for this time, unless you plan to, not be so active in this system that we've already had in place, that we all live off of, unless you have another way to make income, like content creation, then unfortunately, you're not doing yourself a favor, right? So let's dive right into the content creation part of it, okay? There's going to be plenty of people that are coming out with content that's very politically based, that's very polarizing, right? These people may or may not realize how that can affect their working situation, right? And so it's a lot easier when you have a steady source of income to make content on the side. But whenever content has to be your main, source of income, it can be very frustrating. It can be something that is a bit of a you start to lose some of your passion necessarily for it, because not necessarily that you lose your passion, but it's what you're relying on. It becomes what you're relying on because it's all that you have. And so now it goes from something that you can dedicate time to on the side to where you're pushing out as much as you can. And so you're starting to push for quantity instead of quality, right? And I don't think that people realize that certain topics you do have to kind of, in a way, censor yourself. And maybe I think it shouldn't be that way necessarily, because I think, around last year, one of the things that, top candidates were running on was lack of censorship. And so for people to be getting fired from their jobs for, making certain remarks when they can make whatever kind of remark they want on Instagram or whatever, then I think that's a little bit biased. But at the same time, companies can decide, companies can be biased too. They can feel a certain way about a certain candidate, and you being contrary to that candidate can affect your employment. So I think that that's something that you definitely have to be aware of. You definitely have to be aware of how your social media is going to affect your friends, your family, relationships that you built or haven't built yet, and things that can, be positive to you in the future. So you have to be aware of that, because ultimately, the internet is forever. And so the things that I try to post, I try to make sure that they're not extremely too polarizing, but I try to make sure that the people who know and are in the know and are actively understanding and researching things know what I'm talking about without me having to necessarily just say it word for word, because you got a lot of people that clip stuff up. You got a lot of people that, try to make things look a certain way or paint a certain narrative, but ultimately my channel is just it's an informative, objective, platform, in a space where conversations can be had about things, where you can bring people from the left, the right side up, the upside down, whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean? And people can really have intelligent conversations and get off their thoughts, and information can be exchanged, information about money, information about psychology, information about, human behavior, information about hard work, information about game. You see what I'm saying? Uncommon information that you can use to elevate your situation. That's what this is about. You see what I'm saying? So I think it's very important, for people to be aware of all those things. And then another thing I want to talk about, man, is not allowing your passion to get in the way of your purpose, right? And where you are right now. So let's say you're doing content, but you're also working your job, right? But you're not quite at the point where you're getting paid, to make your content. I would say that your purpose, would be for you to continue to work your job, because that's where you can be the most purposeful, and that's where, God has you situated to succeed right now. So especially if you're still young, you need to be working hard. You need to be getting the most out of your job, getting the most out of your time, and having the most effective routine for how you're accomplishing everything day to day, and making micro improvements, getting 1% better every day, setting habits, having the desire for the habit, and then eventually working your way up to where, you can accomplish that habit, whether that be, it could be something small or it could be something big, but the same, principles still apply, because you have to set yourself up to where you're doing positive, creation of habits, and you want to try to take away. And then sometimes it's not all about what you add, it's about what you take away. It's not all about what you do eat, it's about what you're not eating anymore. It's not, so that's also very important as well. Taking away the things, that way you can get back to baseline, because you want to get back to baseline, and then you can start to make, improvements from that point, right? So you have to start thinking about how you can structure your day in the most effective way, right? You can plan out, okay, so I'm waking up at 8 o'clock, right? Then you're showering, doing all your good stuff, so that way you're ready by whatever, done with that by 9. Then you go to work from 11 to, 8:30. Then when you get off, you go to the gym. Then when you leave the gym, you get yourself ready, you shower, all that kind of stuff. Then you read for an hour or so. Then you go to bed and you do it all over again. Start planning out how all the things that have to be accomplished in your day. That's not, representative of my schedule currently, but it could be representative of your schedule. But ultimately, you want to get everything that's in your schedule. You want to get everything that has to be done in a certain time frame or in your day. You want to get that on a piece of paper, and then you want to review how you can do the most with that time and be the most effective during that time. You see what I'm saying? Because once you have everything laid out in front of you, then you can start tweaking, then you can start editing, how you want things to go, and then you can start implementing it. But you ultimately have to try, you ultimately have to attempt to do something different. You can't just come up with this great plan and not put anything into action. Even if you haven't got a full week of doing that adjustment, start out with it on Friday or start out with it on Thursday. Do 2 days in a row. And then now that you've built up what it looks like doing 2 days in a row, then you can do a whole week. Change doesn't have to be just a huge shift. It can be small changes that you're doing where you're testing things out, where you're testing the waters to see, okay, what would it look like if I fully implemented this process or this system on my life, to where I would start to improve these areas but it doesn't have to be all at the same time. You got to start building up the discipline. You have to start building up the endurance and the drive to do these things and execute these goals. You don't want to look at it like, you want to look at it like, I'm a healthy person, so I eat healthy food. I'm a person who's athletic, so I train. You want to have identity shifts when you're trying to create routines. The identity shift is ultimately what's going to change the behavior. It can't just be because I want to eat healthy to lose weight, or I want to work out, to be strong. It has to be a part of who you are and what you do. And once it becomes an identity shift, that's when that routine is locked in. I'm not just reading because I enjoy this book and I want to read this book. I'm reading because I'm a reader and I'm an active learner. You know what I mean? And I'm changing and evolving often to be a better version of myself than I was previous. You understand? So it's about the habit and it's about the identity. And the change of identity really locks in that habit. Right? And it goes for everything. You could say, I'm a person who, when I do something, I do it to the best of my ability and I do it well. That's just how I do it. It's not about, being better than anyone else. It's not about what, your boss thinks. And this can be implied to work. Because a lot of people just do the bare minimum when they're at work. They don't want to go above and beyond, and you don't have to. You do your job and you can go home. But I think people struggle with looking at the clock and looking at how much time they have left, and looking at, they get off at 4 and it's only 10 and they're halfway through. How are they going to make it through? Well, it makes it a lot easier when you're striving to do your job to the best of your ability and not just doing your job at the bare minimum. When you're doing it to your best of your ability and you're actually taking the time to do the job right, and you're giving your best, a lot of time that time's going to fly by, because it's going to be things that you decide to do because you're not in a rush that's going to make that time ease on by, and you're not even going to realize it. So that's one of many ways you can implement that, and that's an easy fix to the problem of always looking at the clock. Do things the right way and don't rush, because the clock will start to melt away when you're doing things the right way. Okay. So I think this is going to be a great year for a lot of people. I know for me in particular, it's going to be my best year financially, spiritually, mentally, and in every way, it's going to be my best year, but I think for other people, they have to really stay focused. They have to really lock in, because it's going to be a lot coming. It's going to be a lot coming. That's going to be a lot of negative energy, and we've already seen it. You see it on the TV, but you don't have to indulge in that. It doesn't have to be in the forefront of your mind when you do what you're doing, when you're living your daily life, unless it's directly affecting you. It doesn't have to be at the front of your mind, because we all have goals. We all have things that we have to accomplish. We all have things that we have to get done, and thinking about all the things that are going on all the time is not the best way to accomplish your goal. It's like you working outside in the cold. Talking about how cold it is, thinking about how cold it is not the best way to push through to that goal. You may feel like you need to vent, you may feel like you need to rant, but maybe it's best to rant or vent about something else. Maybe it's best to talk about sports when you're cold, and think about what these athletes have to go through. I remember back in the day, they used to say at UPS that you were an industrial athlete, right? Change how you're looking at things. Put yourself in a different state of mind to where you can align better with your goals, rather than just waste time talking about things that are distractions or talking about things that are difficult or hard. We have to get back to being good at doing things that are hard, rather than talking about them and exacerbating the problem, So it's going to be a great year. It's going to be a lot of things accomplished. A lot of great things are going to happen. It's going to be a lot of great energy that's going to, come in and allow people to improve and do better. But you have to stay focused. First and foremost, you have to stay focused on you, your goals, what you're trying to achieve, what you want to accomplish, and don't be distracted by the foolishness. You dig? Big Sad. Out.